Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. This is Friday before Memorial Day weekend, and we're going to jump right to good news. So let's jump right in. Earlier today, Governor Cuomo announced that the Mid-Hudson region, and we are in that Mid-Hudson region. Earlier today, Governor Cuomo announced the Mid-Hudson region will likely begin Phase 1 reopening next week. So we will begin Phase 1 reopening next week. Construction of all kinds can now begin staging this weekend. So if you've got a project that you're getting ready to work on, you want to move equipment, you want to move material, you want to get ready for just after the Memorial Day holiday, you are green lighted to go. So green light on Phase 1 next week, and green light on staging and preparing construction, excavating, contracting projects that you maybe have been waiting for as a homeowner to contract. A business may be ready. Any one of our major developments, you can begin staging this weekend. So good news. We have, as we've been saying all along these last several weeks, been trending in the right direction. And in fact, the Mid-Hudson region, we believed 7 county executives, county leaders, Republican and Democrat, all 7, felt earlier this week that we had met the goal and the mission of flattening the curve and reducing the total amount of individuals in hospitals, reduce the pressure on the hospitals, and could safely begin Phase 1, which is an incremental reopening. So as you can see on the screen behind us, we're still using great technology. On the screen behind us, you'll see what is a guesstimated schedule. So we're being told now that if you can start staging construction projects this weekend, you should be prepared to begin work next week, which if that was May 26th, May 27th, if we consider the 2-week increments on the phases, that we would begin Phase 2 on or about June 9th. On or about June 22nd, we'd begin Phase 3, and then July 6th for Phase 4. And now there's a set of business types and sort of low to high risk businesses that the state has identified fit in each of these phases. We'll talk more about that. If you have a question, please type your question in on the comment below the live stream. If we can, what I'd like to do is go to the state's metrics. Remember, we've talked about this. The state of New York has 7 identified measurements, and you know that we've talked a little bit about those metrics. So you can see them on the screen behind me, most of them all having to do with impact to our area hospitals and the demand on area hospitals. As you know, Dutchess County had met 7 of those metrics, all 7 of those metrics earlier in the week, and we are now on pace to meet all 7 for the Mid-Hudson region to begin Phase 1 next week. So again, if you assume May 26, May 27, Phase 1 begins. June 9 would be Phase 2. June 22nd, Phase 3, and July 6, Phase 4. And as I said, all businesses that are impacted, so those that can begin. Remember, Phase 1 includes curbside retail, construction, and all of those particular businesses. You can all begin preparing to get back to what incremental work you can next week. So Phase 1 is construction, manufacturing, wholesale, and retail curbside, along with agriculture, forestry, and fishing. So all of those now you can start preparing. And as I said, we have been given the green light for construction contractors, excavators to begin staging and preparing for going back to work next week. And if you would like to get more details about the phases, the businesses, and some guidance that might be helpful to you, you can visit dutchessny.gov, or the state Empire State Development Corporation has a very, very extensive website that I do give them credit, quite detailed, esd.gov, Empire State Development, esd.gov. So that's a bit of good news. It's what we've been asking for and what we think we have achieved, and I'm happy to be able to share that with you first this afternoon. Phase 1 beginning next week. If you're in any of those businesses, you can begin preparing over this weekend. And we're notifying towns, villages, and cities, so they're prepared. Dutchess BNN will be sharing that information as well, the Business Notification Network, and you should be preparing for that. Kathy asks about when dentists are open for regular visits. We believe they fit in the professional services category, so that would likely be phase 2. Professional services, although because of the nature of a dentist office, there are likely to be some restrictions, but we don't know that yet. The state has not said, and we are awaiting that guidance. Liz asked about camps not run by municipalities. So, campsites, RVs, tents, campsites, Dutchess County is the permitting agency for those. We are reviewing permits, and we're permitting them as we speak, in fact, to begin this week. So if you are an RV, campsite, campground, we'll permit them with certain precautions, and they're proceeding. Day camps or overnight camps, the governor has yet to decide, and the state has yet to order whether or not they'll be permitted this summer. However, Dutchess County feels they can be safely managed with certain precautions taken. We're advising those camp organizations, those campgrounds, to apply for those permits and consider that the timeline that we would impose would be around July 1st, July 6th. That week we would be permitting them. But if the state says no, then we cannot. If the state says yes, we're prepared to move forward the first week of July. Kathleen asked about hair salons. This might be the most frequently asked question. We believe phase 2, professional services. The state hasn't said so, but we believe that is entirely appropriate with the face covering and some social distancing. Remembering that maybe you wouldn't have maybe appointment only, not folks sort of sitting in the lobby or the reception area, waiting area. But we believe phase 2. The state has not said yet. Wendy asked about outdoor dining. So outdoor dining at a restaurant is phase 3. Phase 3. So that would be the last week of June based on the current timetable. However, even today, you can take out from any restaurant and you can go to a public space, so a public park, a municipal courtyard, a public picnic table, and you can eat out. It's just that restaurants are not able to serve outside or inside on premises until that restriction has been lifted. It is one of the businesses that we want to be most helpful to because they are very fragile. Restaurant food industry is very challenging to obviously operate, but in the same respect, they're also likely to be the kind of a business that we want to be sure the right steps are taken. Now, the state has said phase 3. We're going to continue to assist businesses in preparing for that. But as I said, we want you to dine on us. So county parks, municipal courtyards, municipal public space, certainly open to enjoy a takeout meal. And I certainly encourage you to do that. Obviously, we want you to engage in social distancing and to the extent you can, face coverings, etc. But just to be safe. Jennifer asked what phase are gyms. Gyms, we believe, are phase 4, so that would be the first week of July, phase 4, first week of July, and we're working with the local gyms to be prepared and to be open. Of course, I'd expect lesser capacity, but be prepared for that. So what if you work for an organization that's phase 2, but they try to open earlier? Well, you cannot be forced to go to work in a business that's not yet been deemed essential. Now, keep in mind, certain aspects of every business are deemed essential. Maintenance, repair, even cleaning of existing facilities, whether they're open or not to the public, remains essential, and you could be required to do that as part of your employment. If they are not deemed essential and cannot begin opening, you cannot be forced to go to work, and you cannot be fired for not going to work. So I just caution those employers, if you've not been given the green light by the state, Dutchess County doesn't permit you, meaning I don't have some regulatory oversight. A lot of you said, well, open up Dutchess. I didn't close it. So it's not something that Dutchess County has the authority over. However, the state does. So the state can penalize a particular employer, and we just want you to be sensitive to that. So to the extent you can adhere to those phases and that incremental reopening, we're encouraging that to happen. Also wanted to talk a little bit about graduations. I know that there's been a lot of questions about high school graduations. We had a call earlier this week, maybe even yesterday at this point, with all the school superintendents. We provided them guidance. That guidance is not something that Dutchess County is dictating. It is the state of New York. The state has determined what is deemed permissible for commencement and graduation this year. And we provided some additional guidance to school superintendents to share with their graduating high schools. And believe me, I just would tell you, I really do know how absolutely stressful and disappointing it is, and it's going to be that seniors can't walk across a stage and get that diploma, but it is not permitted this year. The social gatherings is what they're trying to restrict. So the New York State gave us some guidance. We got that guidance from the state directly, and then during our control room meetings, these are daily meetings with the county leaders from across the 7 counties with state officials. Graduation ceremonies Graduation ceremonies are allowed to do a walkthrough to receive. Is that true? I'm reading the notes. Graduating ceremonies are allowed to do a drive-through to receive diplomas, not a walkthrough. I'm reading a note. That's not right. So for a graduating ceremony this year, they can be vehicle-based at a drive-in or a school parking lot, vehicle-based. All participants remain in the vehicle. Those officiants, the individuals who are leading the exercise, you can have up to 10 that should be socially distanced or wearing a face covering. They can be out of the car, obviously, and orchestrate the event. However, all of those participating otherwise would remain in their vehicle. Drive-in, drive-through, drive-in theaters or your parking lot, a vehicle-based commencement is permitted. Also allowed is a drive-through graduation, like a procession or a convoy exercise. All participants in a vehicle. Again, those officiating the particular commencement can be outside, somewhat physically distant, perhaps face covering if that's necessary. You're within 6 feet. We are saying, however, that physically that diploma can be handed through that car window to whomever is the graduate during a drive-through graduation. That's the guidance we've given. Any school district that has a question regarding what is permitted or not under the executive order, the governor's order, we've asked to communicate with the Department of Emergency Response so we can assist with logistics and coordinate with local officials. That includes if they occur at a drive-in, just so you know. We're asking school districts both in Dutchess County and those from outside Dutchess County who may be holding a commencement exercise in Dutchess County, you are still required to notify and communicate with the Department of Emergency Response. This is not something unusual. If you have a social gathering in Dutchess, a mass gathering, the Department of Emergency Response, even without a pandemic, is to be notified, and we coordinate with local officials and local emergency responders on those kinds of activities. So I'm sorry. Believe me, I am. I have a neighbor I see just about every night as her family walks around where the block we live on, and they've asked many times about commencement, but no in-person graduations. They're not going to be sitting on lawns and crossing that stage, and I apologize for that. Some school districts are trying to be a bit creative, and I applaud them for that. If you're aware of a school district that's doing something like that, it is not permitted as of today in the state of New York. So just want you to be aware of that. So let's go through a handful of questions. Jamie and others are asking about Department of Motor Vehicles. When will they open? Not stage one, it's phase one. These are state offices administered here in Dutchess County by County Clerk Brad Kendall. But the DMV is a state office. We think that would be phase two, but the state has not yet said. If schools are going remote, who is responsible for Wi-Fi, laptops, and et cetera, says Tiffany. Schools should not be 100% remote, period. End of story. There needs to be, and I know the state is focused on this, but in our estimation, obviously for a lot of reasons, schools need to be in a position to reopen to some degree in the fall. That has not yet been determined by the state. We certainly are going to work with our districts, but as I've said before, no matter what anybody tells you, you cannot use technology to replace the personal connection between teacher and student, and therefore, even with these challenges, we need to find ways to make that work. And I'm confident that we can figure out a way to protect the public's health while enabling kids to get back to school. That said, there is no direction on that as of yet. I know that I, for one, am encouraging that as well. And while we're on that topic, I want to talk a little bit about special education services and summer school. So yesterday, I will say, unbeknownst to any of us, the governor announced early yesterday that summer school would not happen in person this summer. Now, that might be exciting to some kids, but to some, summer school and that personal connection is really one of the only interactions that some young people have with some other adults and mentors. That is being taken from them. I understand the challenge. However, we called some weeks ago, as you remember. I have been asking, as have other leaders and advocates for those with special needs and developmental and intellectual disabilities. The state of New York must have a summer school program that does not diminish the level of service and the level of care that those with developmental disabilities deserve. And so I'm asking you to join me. I sent another letter again today expressing to the governor that it cannot be let to stand. That young people who, in some cases, using the virtual connection, using technology, great experience for some young people with disabilities because it's a tool and a practical lesson. But so many others need to have that direct connection with their speech therapist, their occupational therapist, their physical therapist. There needs to be that direct connection at times to assist those who struggle the hardest, and certainly families. And there are families who struggle very hard to provide care for their child, their family member with a disability. And those therapies, those teachers, those providers are perhaps the one and only professional that can make that absolute connection with their child, their loved one. So I've said this, I made this perfectly clear at a control room meeting yesterday. It is absolutely inexcusable if the state of New York does not come up with a person-to-person, just one-on-one even, a tool or ability for that to happen so that we don't see the regression and the lack of services that young people with disabilities deserve and they need. Use technology to support it, use it to enhance it, but you cannot use it to replace it for those who absolutely need it. And school districts need the guidance, they need the support, and our kids deserve it. And quite frankly, failure to do so, in my opinion, is a violation of their very human rights. And what I'd offer to you is that I ask you to join me in expressing your support to Governor Cuomo. Again, no one's health is at risk, and put no one's health at risk. And I'd offer this to you. County governments are the public health departments in the state of New York. Now, I know you watch, like I have, the 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock press events with the governor, and the Commissioner of Health is there. That's the New York State Commissioner of Health. When he or she has a particular idea, when they have a policy, when they have an initiative, it is county governments who are mandated to implement those services. And in this state, by the way, early intervention, special education, preschool, early intervention services, all provided by county governments. We're the ones who provide the public health services. We're the ones, our staff, responding day in and day out. So when the governor announces these things, it's our county governments that are the ones that are implementing those health-related issues. And so I would say this, our public health people feel absolutely confident that we can begin phase one as we are, and this one-on-one interaction for specific therapies is safe so long as we engage in the kind of practices we expect everyone else to engage in. If you can go off to the beach this weekend on Long Island, the least we can do is to ensure that those with special education needs have the support that they deserve. So we're not backing down. I'm not stopping to talk about it, stop talking about it, and I'm asking you to join me. It is criminal to not have those services available to young people as they need it, again, as they're necessary. Dick is asking when town halls will be open to get permits. Town governments, municipal governments are deemed essential, and so what we've said is, and municipalities all have this direction, towns, villages, and cities need to provide the essential services for those businesses deemed essential. So if construction starts staging this weekend, and it's officially permitted by the state next week, building code, fire inspectors, those individuals are now deemed essential and should be prepared to return to work and to be available to you. And I can tell you, supervisors and mayors in this county, we all work together, and they have been working very hard to be prepared for this next phase. And they know how very critical it is to move projects forward. I'd make a call. I do make the connection as best you can, and they're going to be responsive because we want you getting back to work. Sherry, are businesses required to supply employees with masks, gloves, and sanitizers? I'm going to be clear that employers should have basic protections available to you. So, for instance, a face covering or a face shield if you know you're going to be interacting with the public. But if you're in a job where you're not going to have any interaction with the public, you're not going to be within 6 feet of someone, they're not required to give you a mask. Gloves are only useful if you're changing them after every single exchange of something. Gloves are not very productive if you're in an office all day working and touching and what have you. You'd be changing them all the time. So hand sanitizers, and yes, businesses should have these available for employees. That said, we need you to do it too, right? As an employee yourself, be prepared to go to work with a face covering that you feel comfortable with. Obviously, they should prepare and provide you sanitizer. Make sure that you're using it. We can't do that for you. So all of those things, if you're in a business that's now permitted, you're out to work, your employer should have the basics. But there are certain things that you should be prepared to bring as well. And that is, if you're going to be in a job where you're interacting, perhaps moving paper and interacting with somebody over a counter, they should provide you face covering. They should provide you the sanitizer. But again, if you have those things and you're comfortable using them, you should. Dutchess BNN, Dutchess Business Notification Network, is available for businesses if they wish to find where they can buy PPE and have access to it. And our Department of Emergency Response is assisting them as well. When will graduation plans be shared, Tanya? Tanya, that is up to the school districts, but we've given them direction, and they now have guidance, and they can start making those decisions and work with our Department of Emergency Response to make sure that our graduates have the best celebration that they can have under the circumstances. Karen is asking, what are the odds of a 175-person wedding in August? If those 175 people were in this office, not likely, but if they're in a building that holds 400, it's exactly possible. So to be very careful, I said this on Wednesday, and I want to be more cautious about how I share it with you regarding these kind of activities. Weddings, social gatherings, bigger social events, all permitted in Phase 4. You should expect that there will be capacity limits. So let's just say, for instance, you're booking a wedding at one of our great locations here in Dutchess, and they can stage 400 or 500 people, and the capacity limit is 50%. You can have 200 to 250 people at that location. This is not set yet. The governor and the state of New York has not provided us direct guidance. But again, larger social gatherings would be Phase 4, which would push us into July. So for a wedding, I would certainly not be planning anything formal for the month of July. I do think that it is safe to suggest that the limitations will be somewhat up in the air even into July. However, smaller events in July, I think that that's likely and possible. But Phase 4, based on our schedule, would have you in the second week of July. And then from that point forward, you could potentially be having those kinds of events, as I said, later July into August. But this is all tentative, so I want to be very clear. Phase 4 social gatherings, and certainly social gatherings really of any size, has less to do with the number and more to do with the capacity. If you can engage in the social distancing, disinfecting, and what have you, then that would be entirely acceptable. So that's the expectation. Amanda, what will happen to families with children with special needs? Well, I just went on a rant on that one. So I'm with you. We think that those direct services, those services that provide support to young people with special needs need to be made essential, clearly. And at the end of the day, we need to be sure that those services are provided. I apologize. I'm doing far too many things at once. That said, Carol, our music studio offers private lessons and lessons for 4 to 8 kids. What phase would this be? I'm not going to tell you that I know for certain. It would seem to us you could easily fall in the arts, entertainment, and recreation category, which is Phase 4. Now, again, there may be some desire and some movement on low risk, meaning maybe 1 or 2 students and an instructor in one of the early stages, but I can't tell you that until the state makes that clear, and quite frankly, they don't make things as clear as they need to as soon as they should. So we're going to tell you right now Phase 4, but I would continue to ask and check. You can visit our website for additional information, dutchessny.gov. Massage therapy, skincare, spas, haircuts, salons. We still think Phase 2. But the state has yet to say, and we're hoping to get more direction. So, John, heard the governor say it could be less than 2 weeks between phases. Is that still true? It is true until he says otherwise. And what I mean by that is that initially he did say 2 weeks between each phase, and then he said it could be less than 2 weeks between each phase. And so let's pull up the metrics again, the benchmarks. This is important, right? our goal was to get to phase 1, because once we get there, we know incrementally we'll continue to move forward. Those particular measurements are valuable now moving forward. So we want to be sure that we're staying within those numbers. We're not trying to, we don't see an increase in hospitalization. We don't see an increase in severity of cases. And assuming that happens, the governor suggested we can move quicker than 14 days. So what I have been advising people is I think that worst case, you're talking 14 days between each phase. And I do think best case, you're probably more like 10 days between each phase. I don't think we're doing this every 2 days. So be prepared for that window, 10 to 14 days between each of the phases. We'll keep you updated. That's what we know, and it is what he said, which he's contradicted himself once or twice on that, but we'll continue. Tentative dates for phase 2, I think we showed you that, Steve. I hope you saw those on the screen. We'll pull them back up there so you can see them. Those who are asking about when you might be able to visit children in a group home or supportive living environment, perhaps an individual with intellectual or developmental disability, we don't know yet. The state hasn't said. We've been asking. We think that there needs to be significant focus on this. Those living in those types of residences don't pose the same health risk that perhaps a nursing home or someone with an underlying illness. Some do, some don't. So we think there needs to be some consideration for that, but we're not seeing what phase that might be included in just yet. What phases are malls? I mean, you could argue that it's in the sort of the full opening of phase 3. You could argue phase 2, which is retail with lower capacity. That's a possibility, but the state hasn't said yet. And I think indoor malls, you're more likely to be in the phase 4, but again, we don't know. So let's wait and find out. What phase is the lottery claim center under? That's a fine question. Marianne works for the Lottery Claim Center. I don't know yet. Maybe professional services, which is phase 2, but we don't know yet. So thanks for that. We'll continue to find out for you. Will churches open up this weekend? Trump, the president, says they're essential. I believe they're essential too. However, the Constitution does provide governors of the state to restrict that which is not granted the federal government. And despite the fact that there is a constitutional right to practice your own faith, the operation of emergency response in America is granted to the states. If you remember some time ago, for a brief period of time, the president and the governor had different opinions as to when we were going to shut down and when we were going to open up again. The president, I think, recognizes, and this is true, forget the clause in the Constitution, those powers not articulated in the Constitution are then granted to the states and those, and then ultimately the people. And so this is a conversation that I'm sure the governor and the president will have. They seem to talk a little more often than than others maybe. But I want to remind you, for churches in Dutchess County today, church services, houses of worship, all faith services can occur in a vehicle in a parking lot. Officiants, faith leaders, can officiate and lead that particular service outside of the vehicle. Not more than 10 people can be outside the vehicle participating in the social gathering for the church or faith service. That can happen today in a church parking lot or in a drive-in, and we support that and want you to be safe in exercising your religious beliefs. Believe me, I'd love to see Pastor Frank in Red Hook and get back to church services myself. So hopefully we'll all be able to do that very, very soon. But I don't see any change in the way the state's considering it absent court intervention. So that's the way it is at the moment. We do think, though, that we should move pretty quickly to make it, at least with certain restrictions, safer for folks to participate, although, again, we want to be concerned about people's health and safety. Are hotels open? Yes, they are. Hotels, lodging deemed essential. There still needs to be some limitations, but they are deemed essential and can function. Jennifer asked earlier about contact tracers. I want to thank Dutchess County, our Department of Behavioral and Community Health, for assisting us. Wanted to tell you that we had a requirement to expand our contact tracer program. I want to be clear because I know, believe me, I'm just as happy to rail against the state government as anyone else. We've been doing contact tracing since the 1930s. Contact tracing is a very respectable and professional component of public health and response to infectious diseases. This became even more prevalent during the HIV/AIDS response in the 1980s. Contact tracing is necessary for us to identify with a particular infected individual who he or she may have had contact with for the purposes of advising them that they may have come into contact with somebody who has an infectious disease. We do this, by the way, for all infectious diseases. So Dutchess County, I think, now has over 300 dedicated individuals who are either working for us or volunteering with us to provide those services. The state said we should have 250. We have, I think, 360, so we've exceeded that expectation. You can volunteer with us and still apply for a job with the state of New York to provide that service, to be a contact tracer. I do want to be clear, and because I read it all the time, no one is being asked to leave their home, and no one is being forced to take medication or be vaccinated. And I'd offer you that's not the direction this country should go in, but those are not requirements under the contact tracing programs that we have in public health. We get notified of a confirmed positive case. That individual then gets a phone call from one of our volunteer or paid contact tracers. We, of course, advise them that they've tested positive, that they should participate in a quarantine for 14 days. We provide them support, meaning if they don't have family support, we can provide them access to food and services if they don't have it otherwise. If they're in a household or a setting where they can't stay in that setting, we, by the way, have been putting people in secure shelters or in a hotel or motel room and providing them those supports so that they don't transmit the disease to others. And then anyone in close proximity, we ask them, who of you may have come into contact with in these last several days within 6 feet? And if they remember, they tell us who they are. And if it's Mrs. Smith at the grocery store, or it's our good friend John that I went to have a cup of coffee with, we say, do you have their number? And if they do, we call them and say, John, you came into contact with somebody who tested positive. Here are the precautions you may want to take. Get tested. Here's some contact information. You may choose to self-quarantine for a period of time to make sure you don't have any symptoms and that you protect yourself and don't transmit the disease. And then we move on to the next case. In fact, that's what we do for all the cases you see on our dashboard. And I'd like you to pull up, if you can, the numbers that we're looking at. So Dutchess County, as you know, has conducted nearly 25,000 tests across the county with 3,745 confirmed positive cases. We now have seen a steady and regular decline of those active cases, 1,644 active cases, and that has been a steady decline. And every one of those active cases had someone call them, ask them if they came into contact with others that they may have come into close contact with, and then we've spoken to those people. So we've talked to thousands upon thousands of people and given them some guidance, and it's very, very important for us to do that. Let me offer, I want to offer some additional information. Monday is America's, in my estimation, America's most solemn of holidays. Memorial Day, I think we all would know and agree, very special in that this is the day we recognize those men and women who gave up their life in service to this country. So many from every generation has served America in our armed forces. Monday is that moment we pause as a society to pay respects, not only for those who serve, but for those who gave their life in service, and we're exceptionally grateful. So on behalf of the 300,000 people who call Dutchess County home, I extend my appreciation and gratitude on our behalf to every one of America's servicemen and women, every one of America's veterans, and especially to those families who have had to live on with loss because their loved one did not come home again. Dutchess County's Division of Veterans Services is organized a Memorial Day convoy around the perimeter of Dutchess. It actually kind of fits, convoy kind of circling the perimeter of the county. First, it was the governor had made clear that social gatherings, this is not in your backyard. So these are ceremonies, community activities of not more than 10 people can come together Monday to celebrate, and we encourage you to do that. You can individually visit a cemetery, place a flag, or perhaps go visit, although socially distant, a friend or family member who has served. That is entirely permissible, up to 10 people in those formal services. I'll get back to what we talked about for our own celebrations. As you celebrate, we want you to try to use a face covering, certainly, if you can't social distance, and try to physically distance from one another as best you can. So our convoy on Memorial Day will begin at 11 a.m. in the town of Poughkeepsie. Well, actually just outside the city on Main Street, the county's War Memorial. We have a great convoy of vehicles that'll be traveling from there south. I'll go over the route in just a minute. And we encourage you, if you're along if you're along the convoy route, it's not a parade because we can't have people line the streets. So if you're in a vehicle and you want to wait in your vehicle and display a flag or clap as they come along, or you're along the route and you want to decorate your front yard or your front porch, please do that. It's a great way for us to celebrate together, and I think it is. It's a way for us to celebrate together. Usually we're at the War Memorial for an hour, and then we disperse, and this year we're going to be driving around visiting a handful of communities. So the route will travel on Main Street in Poughkeepsie to Route 9, and then down Route 9 at a slow and steady pace to Wappinger and Fishkill. We're going to take Route 52 through Fishkill to East Fishkill, follow Route 82 out from Fishkill. So we're going to take from Route 9, we're going to go east on Route 52 to East Fishkill. And from 52, we're going to jump onto Route 82 and head out to 376 to Hopewell Junction. From there, up through Beekman Road to Hopewell Junction to Beekman, and then Route 55 out to Pauling, and then up 22, 343, 44, through Pauling, Dover, Amenia, out to Millerton, and then cut across Route 199 from Millerton to Pine Plains, to Milan, to Red Hook, and then back down south through Rhinebeck and Hyde Park to Poughkeepsie again. Got it? It's online. Visit us. You can see it. And it's good that we go through it. I also want to encourage you, listen, Monday and this weekend is often seen as the beginning of summer, and the weather is cooperating. It's going to feel a little bit like that today, tomorrow, Sunday, Monday. It is perfectly appropriate for you to enjoy a small gathering at your home to celebrate Memorial Day. We encourage you to be good hosts, meaning if you're not wearing a mask or you're not encouraging people to be a bit more sensitive to that transmission of the disease, people might not do it. They might feel awkward at your house. We want everyone to be a good example to one another, be considerate of one another. It is perfectly appropriate for you to gather together with some family members. We would encourage you not to invite somebody who might have vulnerability to the disease or some underlying illness. It's certainly appropriate to invite neighbors or friends, so long as you all feel safe that you've been living by these sort of basic expectations. I mean, you can understand. For instance, in my line of work, I'm out all day, right? Although we social distance, we use our face coverings. I may not be the person they invite over because I haven't been in my house for the last several months, sort of staying, just in my home. That might be what a neighbor might want to do. That's perfectly appropriate, and we need to be respectful of that. Or, our neighbors, we know each other, we feel comfortable with each other. We might go across the street, have a drink, have a beer, have a hot dog, enjoy perhaps a social distant, get together, and then go back to our homes. All of that is appropriate. Please don't flaunt it. This is not a moment to have 50 people over, to have a big party. It just isn't. You know why? Because of hospitalizations. Our hospitals are prepared for phase one. They are not prepared for 150 people over the next 3 weeks to come back to our hospitals. They're just not. They can't make it work while also being open. So we really need to be sensitive to that. But please be safe and be considerate of one another as we spend time together recognizing those lives lost in service to this country and celebrate Memorial Day. Also want to mention that we're aiming to restart public transit. Dutchess County's public transit will restart on or about June 6th. We've got dedicated staff, bus drivers and others who are doing wonderful, wonderful work, staying safe. Now, we expect, and you should expect, that there'll be a number of regulations on those buses, but we're going to plan to restart Dutchess County Public Transit on June the 6th. Probably limited capacity, but the routes will be active, and you'll see more information coming your way. But be prepared June 6th on or about for our bus services to be back up and running in a more full schedule, and we encourage you to take advantage of that as well. So as I'm talking about that, and we've mentioned that we're starting phase one, we expect to start phase one next week. Let's talk a little bit about what is open and what is deemed necessary. I've never liked the term essential and not essential. I had a presentation this morning with our business community. I think every job is essential. I think every employer is essential. I think every business is essential. And to have a politician especially tell you what is or is not essential is almost offensive. What's deemed necessary or not necessary, what's deemed permitted or not permitted, that's appropriate language in this case. But let's talk about what's open and what's permittable at this point in time. Again, we've talked about this. We expect to begin phase one next week. If you're in construction, contracting, or any one of those businesses, curbside retail is now going to be available next week. You should ramp up and be prepared for that to happen. You can start this weekend staging and getting ready, and we want you to do that. As I mentioned, social distance religious services permitted in a drive-in or parking lot. Up to 10 people are allowed to officiate and can engage in officiating that service. Municipal libraries, so any library supported by tax dollars. So if you are, I think it's 414 or 214, whatever the code, the tax or finance code that goes along with that, if you're supported by a tax levy, if you're supported by town or village or school district property taxes, you are open. You can be open. You don't have to. You can be open, provide essential services. We recommend curbside pickup and then access into the building for perhaps computer, internet service, things that are deemed critical, but you are permitted to be open now. Retail businesses, as I mentioned, currently, even before next week, any retail business of any size can have an employer and an employee conduct a phone exchange, meaning I saw that shirt I wanted to buy, call in, tell the owner or the employee, I'd like that shirt, and you can have it delivered, right? It can be delivered, and that delivery could be to your home or to wherever you are. So the fact is that can be delivered to you in a vehicle, in a parking lot, or or to your home. So that's currently permissible here in Dutchess County already. Additionally, I want to mention individual student, individual instructor horseback riding permitted, hunt and fishing clubs permitted, acupuncture when prescribed permitted, pet grooming to ensure the well-being of an animal permitted, all auto maintenance now permitted. Non-motorized boating permitted. Motorized boating, you can launch at a boat launch permitted. Golf courses and driving ranges are open. You can use a golf cart. Specifically and very strictly, we're suggesting and saying one person, one cart. However, I would tell you if you live in the same household, there is absolutely no reason that the both of you cannot be in a golf cart, and certainly if there's some medical or physical reason that can't happen. But again, those are the limitations on that. Landscaping of all kinds, gardening, horticulture, drive-in movie theaters. We don't have our drive-in movie theater slides, but we have Dutchess County holds some kind of strange national record of having the most drive-in theaters per capita of any community in the country. I didn't, that's interesting. I just didn't make that one up. So, great drive-in theaters in the town of LaGrange, Overlook, the town of Hyde Park, drive-in, the Hyde Park drive-in, and of course Four Brothers in the town of Amenia, and they're playing some cool stuff. It's like going back to the future. You could enjoy it, and they are all open. As we get closer next week, we'll provide you some additional information regarding what is on the list for that which is permitted and not permitted. Sarah asked about public pools. Can't that be socially distanced and entry can be limited? You know, Sarah, what I have found is common sense sometimes doesn't always find its way to the state capitol. But that said, Dutchess County is permitting public pools, but it's up to the public pools to decide if they want to do that. We have some guidance that we're giving them, and we're waiting for the state to say yes or no. So we're asking applicants to apply, and we'll consider approving them with certain protections and precautions in place ahead of July 6th. That was the phase 4. We believe the first week of July. So that's the timeline we're working from. We're working from the belief that they can be permitted. I won't pretend to be a doctor, but I will tell you that we've seen certainly a lower rate of transmission of this disease among younger people, and we don't see any significant concern for rate of transmission in a chlorinated pool. It's the socialization outside. We believe that is able to be mitigated and we're waiting for the state of New York to give a green light to that. But that's what we're saying. When can chiropractors open? That is a darn fine question. I wonder. I mean, we say acupuncture, but not chiropractor. Apparently, acupuncturist when prescribed, but not chiropractic, although I would have to imagine a chiropractor at some point could be. But I would venture to guess at this point they're probably like spas and that sort of thing, which we're saying is phase 2. So let's wait and see. We do not have an answer on that. We're closing in on the end of our presentation today. As you know, we're here on Wednesdays and Fridays. Next Wednesday, we'll have a Facebook Live town hall along with a telephone town hall. We encourage you to participate in that. If you have any other questions today, please just add your comment to the live stream, and be happy to answer some additional questions. But we have covered it all. Let's go back just to recap the approval on phase 1. The governor announced today that we expect to begin phase 1 next week. Again, for those businesses identified. We're telling you now you can begin staging and preparing to open. That's construction, manufacturing, and retail, curbside retail. So if you're a small shop, you'll be able to do curbside, and that means we're going to encourage our municipalities to get you ready for that. Please be sensitive, face covering, social distancing, and trying to slow the transmission of the disease. Connie, are one-on-one dance and sports lessons allowed? The short answer is no. Currently, that is not currently permitted by the state of New York. Lauren and others are asking again about gyms. I will tell you that there are a few people in Dutchess County who would like to see my gym open up, but that is likely phase 4, recreation activities, and that would be the first week of July. That's our expectation at this point, and you can see the descriptions here. For the businesses that which business falls in which phase, and that's what we're looking at this point in time. So gyms would be arts, entertainment, and recreation. That'd be phase 4. That'd be early July, and we're advising people of that. If you have any questions, type them in below the live stream. I think we're going to try to wrap up in a minute or two. I have our daily control room calls. These are the leaders from the 7 counties. We meet with state officials mostly to push on them to make decisions. As you know, this is the region we're in: Dutchess, Orange, Putnam, Ulster, Sullivan, and Westchester counties are all functioning together. I want to remind you that if you have questions, you can reach out to dutchessny.gov. Dutchess responds. Visit dutchessny.gov. You can also call us at 845-486-3555 at our hotline. You can see those numbers there. Also reference for you that if you're dealing with some anxieties and stress, and believe me, I can understand why we would, the Dutchess County Helpline is available for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Mental health professionals there to take your call or text, 845-485-9700. Available to you. Please reach out to us, and I mean that sincerely. You may be thinking, oh, I don't need that kind of help, but you know what? You tuck your kids into bed, you're worried about paying your rent, you've had a hard time throughout the day, and you feel like you're just going to snap or break, or you just need somebody to cry with. These folks are there for you. I mean that sincerely. You can call or text, find that quiet place, reach out to them. They're there to help. If you're dealing with a mental health concern, a crisis, reach out to us. If you're dealing with addiction, or even if you're having feelings of anger or acting out in some violent way, we are here to help. And so start that conversation with us. Mental health professionals are available for that to happen. I do want to mention to you that our hotline, our 845-486-3555 hotline, will not be open this weekend. You can call, and I think you can leave a message, push a few buttons, but we're letting our call center volunteers and staff have this weekend off. And as we start to reopen activities, you'll start to see this scale back a bit. But for now, they'll be back with us on Tuesday. We're giving them the 3-day weekend to enjoy a little bit of a break. But if there is an emergency, you can always call or text. A true emergency, call or text 911. You can always reach out to that helpline for additional assistance, and you can find us at dutchessny.gov. this weekend. If you are out and about, some municipalities are opening their bathing lakes and ponds. Those are open. You may want to take advantage of that. So visit their websites first. Find out what's open this weekend. Our county parks are open for you to enjoy. And please visit. We're not doing swimming at Lake Wilcox because, if you've ever been to Lake Wilcox, you know that it's a major undertaking to get it ready, both from a staff perspective and obviously from our perspective, not necessarily knowing until this week that they would be available. Wilcox is not the kind of lake you can just flip a switch and open up, but the park is open. You can enjoy it. You can visit Bowdoin Park, the Dutchess Rail Trail, and you can visit Quiet Cove with limited access. And so as we close up today, if you have any additional questions, comment on the live stream below. I want to remind you what you should expect from us because I do think it's important that, especially those of us in elected office, and I have to be honest, on Wednesday somebody called me out and they were right. I said something about weddings and I was wrong. And so I'm telling you I was wrong. To me, a large wedding is more than 75 people, but a large wedding, 200 people in a 600-person venue is not a large wedding. So this is what you should come to expect from us. As I've said, Dutchess County is not going to work or independently. When you lead, you need to lead with people following. And if you don't have a consensus to follow you, you're not really leading. You're just taking a walk by yourself. And so we cooperate with our neighbors. We work directly with towns, villages, and cities. I speak to supervisors and mayors twice a week. And we explain to them what we know and what we don't know. They can critique, they can criticize, they can ask questions. I think that's important. I'd welcome the same with the governor. I think having a direct call among all the county leaders and the governor as we start to reopen would be very, very helpful. I think it's also important that that leaders are informed. So that, meaning from those with whom they work. Certainly, we try to seek expert advice, but collaboration is important. Exceptionally clear. As I said, I wasn't exceptionally clear on Wednesday, so I was too clear maybe. But that said, you should expect us to be exceptionally clear with you. You should expect us to be honest about the risks that we're taking. To those of you who think we can just throw open the doors and everything can go back to the way it was, we can't. We will get there. I'm confident we will get there. But we need to preserve those hospitals. Our hospitals are nervous because while they do great work, they're not built for a massive amount, and 150 is a large amount of people to come in with an infectious disease. And you should expect us to be specific about what we intend to do and how we intend to do it. And I hope we've done that for you and that you see that from us. And the goal here is to protect lives while also helping people get back to living their lives. I was asked about those with disabilities who can't wear masks. First of all, the mandate is not that you wear a mask at all times. The mandate is that you wear a mask when social distancing is not practical. And so that is the order from the governor. It is not an adopted law, but it has the force of law in that it is the governor's executive order. I have the same capacity to issue an emergency order that has the force of law. That is true. There is no deemed penalty, but you can be asked to put one on if you cannot engage in social distancing. If you have a medical reason, you do not have to wear one. You're not asked to wear one. In fact, there's an express waiver for that if you have a medical reason, and no one can ask you what that medical reason is. It is not my business to know what your health condition is, and therefore, if you have a medical reason, you can't wear one. That is the waiver, and that includes those with disabilities. If there's a reason why that would be inappropriate or can't be managed, then you don't have to do that. But we would ask you to engage in social distancing, physical distancing. Nothing replaces the safety that comes from that physical distancing. And so with that, I think I want to offer to you what I offer to the businesses that I spoke to this morning. I know that this is a challenging moment for a lot of people. I do know it. And I know that it is hard to take advice sometimes from people you don't necessarily believe. And so there's somebody watching today and say, that guy just keeps talking and I don't necessarily believe what he has to say. And then there are some of you who think that what we tell you, you hang on to with every breath, and I'm thankful for it. I know how difficult it is to take advice from people you don't always trust and don't always believe, but I promise you that this county is going to continue to tell you what we know as we know it. At the same time, whether you think we should just fling open the doors or that we need to continue to stay shut down, those opinions are entirely valid, and it is our job to figure a way to navigate through it all safely. And that is our promise to you. I cannot tell you that I can appreciate or understand how everyone is struggling, because it would be unfair and it would be dishonest for me to say that. I just know that people are. And no matter the time of day, I hope you see it, we try to respond, we try to get back to you, we try to react, we try to do what we can to fight for you, and we will continue to do that. Fighting for you means that we're going to speak up when something doesn't make sense, and we're going to explain to you something that you may not necessarily agree with. That's what it means to be a true leader and to be in a leadership position, and that's the commitment we have. So there are times that we're not going to always get it right. I hope to be able to admit it to you. There are going to be times that you don't like what we have to say, and you have every right to express your opinions. We welcome that. I want to be responsive to it. And most notably, as a community, we just need to summon the courage. We're going to get through this. We're almost there. I know that people are struggling to pay their bills. I know that you're worried about health. I know that you're standing on the outside of a nursing home worried about the people your loved one living within. But at the end of the day, what we have done together is something very, very special. We've communicated with one another. We have leaned virtually and emotionally on one another, and we are nearly there. And so in the meantime, we are going to continue to work hard to get you the information you need, the answers to your questions, but most notably, we're going to continue to fight for you. And that means listening to those of various beliefs and opinions to try to get it right. You have my promise. And I quoted and was reminded, and I know it's an overly used quotation from one of Dutchess County's favorite sons, but during the midst of the Great Depression, Franklin Roosevelt, as you all know, proclaimed that the only thing we had to fear was fear itself. Now, he was able to do that certainly from a position of power, but he did it with a great deal of humility and modesty. He also did it in a time where, there wasn't so much communication clouding the message that we need to hear from one another. But the truth is, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. There will be ways to get through this together. The federal government, layers of government need to step up. There needs to be help. There needs to be relief. But don't let that anger, don't let that fear, don't let that anxiety get the better of us, and we'll get through it. And so in the meantime, Dutchess County stands shoulder to shoulder with you. I promise you that. And we're very, very grateful to all of you for your patience, your cooperation, and for continuing to speak up and speak out. It's your right. We encourage it and we welcome it. And on behalf of the nearly 300,000 people who call Dutchess County home, let's continue to fight on. Let's continue to stay strong. We will fly again. And we will get through this together. Ladies and gentlemen, have a tremendous weekend. If you need us, reach out to us. We're here for you. Thanks very much.